Greetings. Do without wilt shall be the whole of the law. I'm Lexi Eve, and welcome back to another episode on Magick Without Tears. Today we're diving right into Chapter 26, Mental Processes. Two only are possible. Let's begin. Quote, Karasura, occult science is the most difficult of them all. For one thing, its subject matter includes the whole of philosophy, from ontology and metaphysics down to natural history. More, the most rarefied and recondite of these has a direct bearing upon the conduct of life in its most material details. And the simplest study of such apparently earthbound matters as botany and mineralogy leads to the most abstruse calculations of the imponderables. With what weapons, then, are we to attack so formidable a fortress? The first essential is clear thinking, end quote. I've said something like this on this channel many times. Occultism is a science, and what we study and experiment upon is the universe. But what differs occultism from the vulgar sciences is that we firstly acknowledge that the mind has limitations which cannot penetrate past a certain point, and secondly, that with certain symbols and elevated states of consciousness, we can perceive some of the subtle layers and experience the rest, thereby extrapolating the highest spiritual planes through the lower ones. Also, Crowley yet again in this book is going to write about essentials of a strong mind and critical thinking abilities. This is extremely noteworthy. He is writing these letters here published to a student who was no more than a neophyte, if not a probationer. And the book overall, Magick Without Tears, though it at times deals with heavy subjects concerning magic and what have you, is overall beginner-friendly, at least so far as occultism is concerned. Whether any of the literature published by Crowley or books he recommends is beginner-friendly is another matter. I think inevitably, since most of the books are very difficult, wherever you start studying is beginner enough, and then you come back to it and it makes more sense later on. But my point is, the fact that he has so many times pushed the reader back towards the importance of quote-unquote clear thinking in Magick Without Tears tells us that training the mind is of the utmost importance to the student. If you're prone to conspiratorial or viewpoints or easily persuaded without being able to hold a difficult discourse in pursuit of truth, you are going to be led astray with this work. Let's continue. Quote, what do we do when we think? There are two operations and only two possible to thought. However complex a statement may appear, it can always be reduced to a series of one or the other of these. If not, it is a sham statement. Nonsense masquerading as sense in the cloak of verbiage and verbosity. Analysis and synthesis, or subtraction and addition. One, you can examine A and find that it is composed of B and C, as in A equals B plus C. Two, you can find out what happens to B when you add C to it. B plus C equals A, end quote. I think a safe way of looking at this is that because the thing only has meaning due to its relation with other things, whether that's perception or how it interacts with other things, you learn in the matter of observation by seeing how a thing behaves when it interacts with those other things. This is especially true for our human perceptions, which need to filter stimuli through our senses in the brain in order to see, hear, smell, feel, and taste. Likewise, take a statement such as, from the Tao Te Ching, quote, the Tao that can be trodden is not the enduring and unchanging Tao, end quote. So to use that example, your perceptions plus your idea of the Tao you think you're observing does not equal the Tao. It may equal the manifestation of the Tao, but it is not the Tao. Same as the Ein Sof. Mathematically, a positive plus a positive cannot equal zero. As you can see, I've had the two statements on the screen the entire time. Crowley is going to give his own examples now. Quote, as you notice, the two are identical after all, but the process is different. Example, raise copper oxide to a very high temperature. You obtain metallic copper and oxygen gas. Heat copper in a stream of oxygen, you obtain copper oxide. You can complicate such experiments indefinitely, as when one analyzes coal tar or synthesizes complex products like quinine from its elements. But one can always describe what happens as a series of simple operations, either of the analytical or the synthetic type." End quote. So there you have it. That's the gambit of this chapter. And while, say, idle or small talk have their places in certain occasions, so far as studying the occult goes, always try to think about the things that you're studying in relation to something else, as well as how things change under specific circumstances. This is most especially true for the Kabbalah. This is most especially true for understanding oneself. Thus, you have your magical record to document your progress, reduce variables, see what was happening when a practice went awry, or see what happens when you got a practice perfect and you made serious progress. Quote, "I wonder if you remember a delightful passage in Anatole France where he interprets an exalted mystical statement, first by giving the words their meaning as concrete images, when he gets a magnificent hymn, like a passage from the Rig Veda. Secondly, by digging down to the original meaning, with an effect comical and even a little ribald. I fear I have no idea where to find it. In one of the odds and ends compilations, most likely. So please look, somebody. You won't have wasted your time." End quote. Francois Anatole Thibault was a French writer in the late 1800s. A few of his short stories are titled The Mass of the Shadows, Lucifer, and The Daughter of Lilith. I've only read the last one of these, and it's an interesting sort of apologetica for original sin, in which the author implies the virtue of oppositions of behavior and experience. I think it misses the mark of, say, the lemmic 0 equals 2 opposites by positing, in the author's view, the fact that good and evil exist, which allows free will. So I think it misses the mark due to the Christian Abrahamic sort of backdrop, but it's an interesting story nonetheless. So moving forward, here comes a second example by Crowley of choosing the right words and analyzing the statement under the guideline that he stated previously. Quote, "Try something simple. The soul is part of God. Now then, when he writes soul, does he mean Atma or Buddha, or the higher manas, or Purusha or Yechaida, or Neshama, or Nefesh, or Nous, or Psyche, or Phren, or Ba, or Ku, or Ka, or Animus, or Anima, or Seal, or what? As everybody willy-nilly creates God in his own image, it is perfectly useless to inquire what he may happen to mean by that. But even this very plain word, part, does he mean to imply a quantitative assertion, as when one says 6 pence is part of a pound, or a factor indispensable as when one says a wheel is part of a motor car, or part actually means a share, that which is provided, according to Skeet." End quote. So far as the example statement, that the soul is a part of God. So this can imply that the soul is a piece of God broken off, or is a piece still connected, or a host of other things. In any case, interpretation still comes from one thing in relation to another, either by adding it or subtracting it from the source, not to mention by the person who's reading it is going to have their own understanding of those terms. If you ask a Christian that statement, that the soul is a part of God, they're going to go with their interpretation. You ask, a Thelemite, their interpretation of that statement, they're going to give you a completely different answer. And this is the danger of language. Many words have many meanings, and each meaning can have a ton of connotations. This is exactly why in communicating it is better to be precise or state that you are speaking in a generality. Any person reading or hearing a term, especially one as loaded as God or soul, is going to pick the meaning they most prefer. Therefore, when conversing with someone, try to really inquire and get them to be as specific as possible so that you know exactly what they mean when they say something. Crowley will go further with this point, quote, "The fact is that very few of us know what words mean. Fewer still take the trouble to inquire. We carelessly assume that our minds are identical with that of the writer, at least on that point, and then we wonder that there should be misunderstandings. The fact is that usually we don't really want to know. It is so very much easier to drift down the river of discourse lazily, lazily, drowsily, drowsily in the noonday sun. Why is this so satisfactory? Because although we may not know what a word means, most words have a pleasant or unpleasant connotation, each for himself either because of the ideas or images thus begotten, of hopes or memories stirred up, or merely for the sound of the word itself. Then there are devices, style, rhythm, cadence, rhyme, ornamentation of 1,000 kinds. I think one may take it that a good writer makes use of such artifice to make his meaning clear, the bad writer to obscure it, or to conceal the fact that he has none." End quote. I think that doesn't need further explanation, so here we're almost done, and we're ending with a practice from the Abbey of Thelema, of which you can do amongst a small group of friends on your own. Quote, "One of the best items of the education system at the Abbey in Cefalù was the weekly essay. Everyone, including children of 5 or 6, had to write on the housing problem, why Athens decayed, the marriage system, Buddhist ethics, and the like. The subject didn't matter much. The point was that one had to discover, arrange, and condense one's ideas about it so as to present it in a given number of words, 93 or 156 or 418 words, as like as none. That number neither more nor less. A superb discipline for any writer." End quote. What I'll say first is that the Abbey of Thelema was for AA training. And remember that AA, first and foremost, is a college. So taking the idea of writing essays is extremely common amongst its students. For the listener, you need not be part of that brotherhood to take up this practice as a discipline. Try picking a subject, looking for books, and creating a thesis on the subject. Take that expansion of knowledge practice to the next level by limiting how many words you can use. Further, by using the exact amount of words you mandate and by limiting your speech through writing, you would be very careful of every word you use to communicate your point more precisely. So here Crowley then closes this chapter, or this letter to Mackie, by recounting the rewriting of an OTO initiation ritual for a person who is deaf. To recap, we talked about this before, but it forced him to reimagine the entire ritual, and thereby he had to communicate the proper effect of the initiation without the speeches which are always used. He had told this story in another letter previously chaptered in this book, so I'm not going any further than just summarizing as I just did, and we're going to end here. Love is the law, love under will. Catch y'all in the next one.